Hello, welcome to Relearn Wrap Up with your host, the Game Changers, Phil
and Adriano.
So Barcelona, Dallas, Fort Worth, Portland, Oregon, Wallara, and Sunshine West. What a collection of folk we have today. Our theme is, what is your why? I'm excited. I can't wait. Let's go, Adriano.
I'm really excited to be here again, Phil, as we continue to support the Relearn Festival, a festival that continues to inspire us all about the new tomorrow of what schooling could possibly be. We have three wonderful guests, and I might start with you, Mark. Could you just introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Hano. I'm from Barcelona. And let me tell you just a little bit about me. So I'm consider myself a 360 nomad educator. And honestly, just here and there, everywhere, all over the world. And I really, really love just learning ecosystems in every single place. So maybe Melbourne next time, who knows? Yeah, okay.
Or you could try a real city like Sydney, Mark, but that's okay.
Why not?
oh, those people in Sydney, they suffer so much. They suffer so much. Chelsea, can you explain a little bit about who you are and where you are at the moment?
Hey, I'm Chelsea Robertson. I'm from Dallas, Fort Worth, and I just partner with educators and schools and them so that they can have a bigger impact. I just love education, and I feel like it should be, everywhere all the time.
Thank you. And finally, you, Trevor.
Thank you. It's great to be here. My name is Trevor Saponis. I am the founder of the Sustainable Learning Projects. I had a presentation on Monday, and I've been loving the conference so far. There's so many good events already.
One of the key things that has come from yesterday's day 3 experience at Relearn was a consistent thread around the notion of purpose-driven life, or purpose-driven life, I should say. That's all I'm going to be saying. So I'm really interested in your perspective, and I'm going to throw over to the group about what some of your key learnings were from yesterday, or even in relation to that particular theme. Who would like to go first? Just jump in.
Go on, Chelsea.
Why are you picking on me? Okay, all right. I love the concept of that purpose-driven because it's very intentional. And there's so much that's happening within the conference, and all of it's intentional. There's very rarely, if ever, great education or learning experiences that just happen by chance. Most often it's this intentional, purposeful thing, and to be intentionally to understand your why. And I think that's reflected so well in all of these in the Learn Life conference.
What are your thoughts, Mark?
Well, one of the key takeaways that I took from yesterday is this whole idea of just finding your why becomes a kind of North Star, like your guiding star that is going to drive you into wherever you want to go, but at least you know where to head to. Yeah, you know what drives you, what moves you. And every single step and action that you just make in the educational world or wherever in our personal lives, they are just going to be moving, towards that why. So that gives us, like that kind of move towards our real reason, for doing something.
So it's really interesting listening to you there talk ultimately about our quest for self-actualization and working towards that. It's really interesting because, I'm a believer that we're all on a kind of unique and personal journey, that we're all kind of seeking understanding and meaning and wisdom and knowledge, and that we want to know why we're kind of here. And no doubt that the young people in our learning communities, kind of crave this kind of purpose, acceptance, and kind of ultimately love around, their own existence. Trevor, can you maybe share with our listeners a little bit about your why?
Sure. And I just want to, Adriano, just respond to that point.
Sure.
I agree that everyone is in that journey, and schools are designed in such a way that is completely the opposite of the experience they have. And so the why that I've heard that I work towards, and I also heard over and over, is about the purpose and making learning meaningful right now. This idea of making learning purposeful for a pretend future occupation or a potential future occupation is misguided. And that's really the theme that I heard, is that we have to do things right now. And that's really the work that I'm doing. And so that, the presentation that I gave was around setting up a seaweed and shellfish farm at a school in Alaska, right? It's not theoretical. Those students will both eat and sell the products that they make. And it's that level of immersion that I see over and over from the presenters in this conference.
Phil.
I'm interested very much in the notion of how we bring the whys together, because we've got three wonderful guests here who are just doing great work out there to inspire and work with educators to help connect different ways to create purpose. In your experience, how do we help schools and school communities bring together a collective sense of purpose? Who'd like to go first? I can't ask Chelsea this time. Trevor.
You go ahead, Trevor, mate.
I'll dive in. One of the things I always talk about is schools are currently structured as if the internet doesn't exist, right? There are four walls, and all the learning lives and dies, and with an emphasis on the dies, within those four walls. And so how do we connect these things? I think an actual utilization of the internet in ways to connect students across space and time is going to be the next frontier. Who's going to be able to do that in an interesting, networked, collaborative way? That's what I've seen, and I see hints about that, and everyone's thinking about it, even if they're not articulating it as such. But right now, we're still using the internet, if at all, on the most basic level. And so I'm really thinking about, when I see these presentations, what are ways that we can connect students across space and time?
And I wonder whether, by giving students more voice and agency and autonomy, whether or not our schools would actually get there a whole lot faster. The thing for me is I see more and more is just this notion of adults getting out of the way and letting children take control. What have you been seeing at the conference, Ma, and around your own work around how we bring the whys together, the purposes of different people together?
Well, first, as I could hear you, speaking about this why and the collaboration, agency and voice and all together, it just came to my mind that many times it's not only about looking for the whys with kids, but with educators, and that happens many times. So Trevor, you were making reference to the internet, and actually this is like every single step of movement or innovation that comes into school is like, okay, why are we doing this? Just because it's cool? Just because everybody else is doing it, or because we really believe that there's a reason behind that? So for me, just looking for the connection in between the whys, it moves like in a kind of cascade, like, so we have this, or we tend to have in more standard, all traditional, kind of schools, this kind of hierarchy. And in the end, it's like, okay, let's all together think about why we are doing whatever we do. So it has happened to me, when we got into this lovely pandemic, a great learning opportunity indeed, then I could see how a whole school was just moving. Well, many schools, all the schools over the world, try to move from in person to online and remote, virtual education, wherever. But in the end, it was like, okay, but why are we doing these changes? How are we doing these changes? And why do you think that that's the best way to do it? Some people were just doing the same things and trying to replicate that, into a virtual or online remote learning kind of schooling, and all these kind of whys, and creating, I would say even more, that it's about creating a culture of why, a culture of reasoning, a culture of thinking, why we are doing what we are doing. And not just because it's cool, not just because, well, the curriculum says this or that, you know. So I think that at every single level, we have to think about those, every single wise, yeah. And this morning I had the opportunity to attend to a workshop it was about creativity. It was, his name was, I had it there, Michael Anderson, yeah. And it was great to see how he got into this creativity process. And one of the steps in there was ask about the why, and really why. So just going deeper into that why. And that made me think like, yeah, it's not only, you know, keeping at the first level why, but just why and why and why and why, just going deeper and deeper into that. Yeah.
You posed a really interesting question just then, Mar, and the question was, you know, why do we do what we do, basically? And so, Chelsea, I'm going to ask you that question. Why do you do what you do?
Ooh, I like this question. Okay. I think because it all comes around. So my work kind of revolves around working with educators and education related businesses or anything in that world, and actually having them find, clarify, and communicate their why. And then having it connect to other people's why. And in response to the previous question, how do we get everybody's whys to kind of come together? And I think a big answer to that is understanding what yours is, so that you can then communicate it clearly, others can communicate that, and then you can find how that networks together. Like Trevor was saying, the internet's a huge piece of that, and how do we get all that to come together? And I think so much of that is very simple. A two-step process is understanding your why, clarifying and communicating it, finding other people, right? But then getting out of the way and letting what you're doing and what you're growing, let the students drive that, because they're the ones who are experiencing and growing, you know, the internet and all these communication tools way better than we old people are. I mean, you old people.
Great. Trevor, I'm interested to know from you, why is it that you think this quest for self-actualization, or an opportunity for a deep self-exploration of our own growth and who we are and why we believe what we believe, why isn't that emphasized more and more in modern education, or I should say schooling, as opposed to this kind of weddedness to a hamster wheel of standardized testing and curriculum that is, you know, pre-prescribed in boxes taught by one teacher at one time?
Because school has never been the objective of school, right? We're asking it to do something that it's never done before. And that's significant. And so it's no surprise that, you know, in the United States before 1970, we only had about a 70% graduation rate. So 30% of the population was dropping out when they were 15, 16, 17 and going directly into the workforce. And it wasn't a problem when the workforce could do that. But all of a sudden, you know, within a decade, we said, you know, actually, if you don't graduate high school, you're most likely going to live a life of poverty, and most likely affiliated with the criminal justice system, particularly if you're Black and brown. And so this major shift around who education is for and our expectations around it. And now I think we're going to Adriano's point, this, you know, self-actualization, right? Actually, we just need them to remember, you know, what a quadratic equation is, right? A, B, C, or D, right? We still, you know, the conversations we're having, I don't think are meaningfully happening at a school level when it's around, you know, our standardized testing is this, and therefore our potential funding is that. And I'll stop there.
So it really is about the doing of things for the doing of things, rather than thinking about what we're actually trying to do and how we're trying to do it. Do you know, guys, one of the things that we've found when we talk with teachers around the world is that the more often we ask them what their why is, and the more often we ask them to think about what their purpose is, the more likely they are then to think about the purpose of their students. You know, it's that funny thing, you know, if you teach a teacher how to reflect properly, they'll get their kids to reflect properly. But if you don't address it at a professional level, that becomes really challenging. We have a situation in our profession where we burn through over half of our profession within the first 5 years. Trevor, you're nodding your head really strongly at the moment. How do we stop this disconnect where we get really good educators or really good people and we just lose them
Absolutely. And this was a lot of the work that I did. I used to work for the New York City Department of Education with, 1.1 million students and 70,000 educators, and that, 50% leaving within the first 3 years was true. And I worked a lot on teacher training. And so one of the things that we did is that in our efforts to support teachers, we found that an average beginning teacher, an average first year teacher was receiving feedback between 7 and 11 people, none of whom had ever spoken to each other.
Mm.
And when you think about, right, just the overwhelming, right, we're not even talking about the fact that we're putting a full load on the most inexperienced teachers in the most difficult situations, right? Seniority gets you easier classes rather than using an equity lens and getting, where would your talents be of the most use for the most number of students, right? That's not how we approach school. And so it's not surprising to me that, we have the not only the retention, but particularly in the United States, we're looking at a massive teacher shortfall within the next 10 years, particularly around high need subject areas, particularly in high need schools. Just to give you one example, I worked with a school in rural Montana, and they had a science opening for 1 calendar year, and they received 1 application.
Mm.
Right? That's the level of choice that schools are having around teacher quality, AKA it doesn't even exist.
Yeah, there's another school we've been working with over in Auckland in New Zealand, and they were looking for a physics teacher. In the entire country of New Zealand, there were only 6 physics graduates last year.
Mm.
So, and most of them weren't interested in being teachers. So it's a fascinating question, isn't it?
Ma, you live in one of my favorite cities in the world, or you're currently in one of my favorite cities in the world, in Barcelona. It's a city that continues to inspire simply through its theatre of life and the way in which, you encounter spaces, places, people, food, the color, the movement of La Rambla, all these kind of places that continue to inspire. You can have an encounter with a Gaudi motif on a pavement, or a Picasso or a Miro. What is it about schooling that continues to ignore living and feeling in this world? Because I kind of get a sense that so much of what people in the Catalonians in Barcelona do is that they live and they feel this world, with great passion and verve. Why can't we replicate that type of vibrancy and commitment to who we ultimately are? And that's home to a life that feels and bleeds and thinks and does and is fallible. Why can't that be replicated in a school setting to truly inspire people from a creative context?
Well, you went like very, very deep, Adriano, in there. Well, I have to say that I honestly, Barcelona is full of, I believe that as in many places all over the world, like different type of schools and different types, of learning ecosystems. I think that some of them have been really trying to get into the vibrancy, of the city in some way. I mean, whenever Barcelona has a lot to offer, yeah. And I think that whenever a school sees an opportunity, or a learning opportunity outside, and around the city, they just take it, yeah. I don't know, I just feel like, yeah, sometimes you feel like you would like to do more and more and to get that vibrancy, from the surrounding, into the school and the other way around. Yeah. And there may be some kind of constraints, but as long as or a school, a teacher, an educator, whoever sees an opportunities, yeah, then they just go for it. I remember, for instance, there's this museum of optical illusions, and I remember just telling, sharing in my school, oh, we have to go there, we have to, because kids are going to love it. That's going to be a very interesting experience for them, and so on and so forth. In the end, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, it's brilliant listening to you guys talking in and around this notion of purpose, because what's just coming out of the conversation is that connection between a sense of purpose and place. Thank you, Ma. And practice. Thank you, Trevor. Chelsea, I'm going to come to you for the last question. A sense of who our people are is really, really important to help people connect to their why, and particularly in education, because it's the ultimate relational craft in so many ways. How do we help people in schools find their people and connect with their people and pass on their energy to other people and inspire them along the way?
I love that. I mean, so the school that I most recently directed, we had 2 filters that everything had to come through, right? Relationship and collaboration. If you could not strain your action through relationship and collaboration, then, we didn't do it. The activity should be the container for the relationship, not vice versa. And so I think I love that, because humanizing education is the focus of where we need to be, right? Education or learning in a big picture is not curriculum standards and meeting those things. It's about the human. I mean, these are tiny, real life people that we're talking about, that can't be compared to each other. And so in my experience, when I work with teachers, then it's really about treating it holistically and saying, all right, here's where you are. How did you experience this? And modeling it for them in the relationship of the administration, and then giving them the opportunity to model it in the classroom in that way. And your administrative responsibilities and interactions needs to be what you want in the classroom. You can't lead one way and expect something of the other. If you're not leading through relational values, then you're not teaching your teachers to do that, and all the way down, right? And to Mars' conversation about the hierarchy, we always talked about ours as a circle with our students and families in the middle, and then everyone surrounds. And so that we always knew whatever we were doing, it wasn't about who we were serving at the top or right, who was in charge, but rather who's in the middle of what we're doing. And then we're consistently revolving around that why with the relationship and collaboration. And I mean, that's I think the big picture is just humanizing all of it.
So much of what I've heard today from the three of you, I'm going to pinch your word, Chelsea, is intentional. And it's intentional about the relationships that are at the heart of schools, and that how we can continue to leverage the character apprenticeship between the peer and the teacher, as well as peer and peer, and of course the wonderful, powerful social exchange that goes on within schools. Often they're the things that we never measure, and they're probably the things that really matter. I just want to say to Ma, to Chelsea, and to Trevor, thank you very much for being on our wrap-up show today. And to our audience, I'm going to just kind of leave you with this final thought about the notion of why. We've all got to realize the truth is that we're all a home to a life, that your heart is not a place to visit. It's your home. And I encourage everyone to kind of unleash their why and embrace what burns inside of you. Honor this truth, honor your heartbeat, honor your sound, because it's for it's your authentic self that the world wishes to see, not another person afraid of their own possibility or even afraid of their own why. So, Phil, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thanks, guys. We want to thank Trevor Sponis. We want to thank Mark Cano. We want to thank Chelsea Robertson and the indomitable Adriano Di Prato, of course, for joining us on this wrap up today. Enjoy the festival. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm tending to log on after my day of work and finishes sometime, and then spend the evening and then the early morning before I start work catching up. It's great seeing all the different things that are going on, all the energy and all the passion. Don't forget that next week at the Relearn Festival, there's an awesome array of workshops that will be on too. So tell your friends, and if you like what you see, then get into it. The Game Changers podcast is produced by Oliver Cummins for Orbital Productions. It's powered by schoolfortomorrow.com and circle.education. It's available on Apple Podcasts, on SoundCloud, on Spotify and on Google. If you like what you hear, tell your friends, subscribe, like, you know what to do. Let's go.